Welcome back to the Fit 40 podcast, where we simplify exercise and nutrition for busy parents 40 plus so they can improve their health and feel amazing. I'm your host, Brian Fitzsimmons, certified personal trainer and nutrition coach for people over 40 since 2015. And today we have an awesome topic on deck. We are going to be talking about lead in your protein powder. Oh my God. Okay. I know most people have seen the highlights around high levels of lead being found in popular protein powder brands that a lot of us may have in our house right now. So I'm going to talk about it and hopefully answer any questions that you have and provide a little bit of reassurance on what the best thing you could do going forward is. But before we get into that, make sure if you aren't already, you hit that subscribe button or the follow button so that way you're subscribed or following wherever you're watching or listening. And that way, going forward, you don't miss another episode, so you don't miss important topics like this. So before we jump into all this, let me just say that, I understand I am a personal trainer and nutrition coach. I am not a toxicologist or a PhD on these certain things. I just do my best to find out from those people and from the sources that they use to educate myself as best as I can. So based on all the digging that I've done, I'm going to give you a little overview of what's going on. And at the end, I'm going to stay in my wheelhouse of awesome habits that you can implement to get the best results possible, given all of this information. So let's talk about it. First thing, we want to acknowledge the fact that Consumer Reports came out with their annual report. Now, this is a company that has a history of really blowing things out of proportion and really driving a lot of fear around things, because when you are a company that relies on people reading your stuff, you have to shock and awe. You got to drive home that, oh, you have to read this. Otherwise, you're going to be left to all these bad things happening to you. So there's a little bit of negative incentive that comes with that. But what they reported was that there was a concerning amount of lead in popular protein brands. The two worst offenders that they came up with were the Huel brand, which honestly, from things I've heard about that company, especially like with their creatine gummies and other things like that, they're a garbage brand anyway. I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. And Naked Protein Mass Gainer, I believe, was the one. They were one of the top ones to avoid. And then just in general, the ones that made the lists were typical like mass gainers and plant-based ones, because when we're talking about lead, it does tend to come from soil a lot of the time. So if we're doing a lot of plant-based, like basically grinding up a bunch of plants into this protein blend, the chances of lead getting in compared to something like whey are a lot higher. Now, the level that they use to test good, bad, and everything in between was based on California's Proposition 65 from back in 1989. And it's not really based on scientific data that other people use, like the NSF Certified for Sport, which is like the top level of what we have as far as third-party testing in the US. Also, what the US government, Europe, like many countries in Europe, the WHO, it's a lot lower than that. So to put it in plain terms, Proposition 65, let's see how many times I'll mess that up. They only allow for 0.5 micrograms of lead in the product. So 0.5. What does NSF allow? 12.5. And how about USA, Europe, and the WHO? 100 micrograms. So this is like, what would that be? Like 0.5% of what is acceptable across the world. So the reason for this, I did look into it. I'm like, there's no way that they just arbitrarily set this, because if that's the case, why not just say no lead's allowed? Because that would be kind of obvious, right? Basically, what they were trying to go at was they were trying to design this to protect vulnerable populations like pregnant women and children. So if you really want to dot your I's and cross your T's, then probably avoid protein powder when pregnant, and for little kids, if you want to be super duper extra, really on top of it and make sure that you're not exposing yourself to that. But when I look into the people that I trust to give me information and allow me to dig further, I look to people like toxicologists, because if we're talking about lead poisoning, who better than to go to toxicologists or nutrition PhDs that are very familiar with farming practices, with all these things that influence our food supply and other things like that, and all these other experts in between. What do they think? Because at the end of the day, I want to know what the group consensus is, not what one specific party of scientists tested for, not this one Consumer Reports, not one rogue doctor. Like, I want to know what the group thinks, because consensus among experts is the best that we got. So when you look at what a lot of them say, at least for the ones that I get my information for, they view this as nothing more than fear mongering and not helpful because a lot of people don't eat enough protein as it is. So it presents another host of issues if people say, okay, that's it. I'm never touching any sort of whey protein at all or any sort of protein powder at all. All right. But that being said, it does bring up an importance for talking about things like the regulatory oversight that does not exist in the US due to things like the 1994 Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act. And what that did was it defined supplements as a category of food, not drugs, even though many have pharmacological effects, especially if we're talking about these ones that claim to improve your brain function and your mood and all these things that do have some sort of like profound effect. So this means that they don't have to get pre-market FDA approval before it hits the shelves. There is no requirement of proof or safety or efficacy before going to market, and companies are assumed trustworthy unless proven otherwise. So naturally, they're going to take full advantage of that. And like we see all the time, people die, people go to the hospital, people get really hurt by supplements. Okay. A lot of times people just brush this under the rug because they don't want to admit the fact that, oh, this was caused by supplements, but liver injuries are a huge thing. Like there are a lot of people who take certain supplements and they start getting a really weird pain in their side and they're like, oh, what is this? And then their doctor, or maybe they just decide on their own, they say, okay, I'm just not going to have this thing, and boom, the pain goes away, luckily. But this is the reason for stuff like that, because supplement companies can and will get away with whatever they can. And in contrast to prescription drugs, because people love saying, oh, this is natural products too, by the way, guys, like botanicals, like ashwagandha, anything in that wheelhouse of like you see, oh, this awesome healthy blend. No, if you get too much of anything, it's bad. Lead is natural, by the way. So if we really think natural is good, lead is in that category. So what about these pharmaceutical drugs? Guess what? The burden of proof is the prescription drugs, they got to go through years and years of clinical trials and get FDA approval before being sold. They dump millions and millions of dollars, billions of dollars into proving that these will not harm you, or if they will, they know exactly what the recommended amounts are to minimize how many people are negatively impacted by that. So when it comes to supplement companies, the burden of proof is on the FDA. Like basically the FDA has to prove, hey, this supplement is not good, even though it's on the market, people are buying it. And let's be honest, the FDA is getting gutted every single year by the government. So they have less resources to actually test these companies and hold them accountable. So we have a shit sandwich right about now. Okay. And under that act, the FDA must prove a supplement is unsafe before it can take enforcement action, like I just said. Sorry, just going through my notes here, guys. And companies don't have to prove that their product works in any way, shape, or form, that it's safe, or that it even contains what it claims. So that label doesn't even have to be accurate. Okay, this creates a sell first, test later environment. So there's a lot of labeling loopholes and weak claims. It allows companies to make structures or claims that like, oh, it supports immune health or it boosts metabolism. And then they'll include this fine print that says this statement has not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not indeed to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease, even though their marketing says exactly that. So there's nothing holding these companies accountable at all. All right. So to go into the third party testing a little bit more, this act made it so that it like doesn't require third-party testing for heavy metals like lead or cadmium. Oh God, as you can tell, not a super duper expert here. They don't test for pesticides because I know a lot of people do care about that. Bacteria to make sure that they're being stored properly and they're not going to make you sick, or potency to make sure they even do the job because it's at a level that is required to get the effect that it says. And that's why you'll see voluntary certifications like NSF certified for sport, USP verified, or informed choice. Now, if we're talking out of those three, I would opt for NSF certified for sport, just saying. And USP is not bad either, but it does allow for more, I guess you could say it's a little bit looser than NSF, because there have been brands that were USP certified that were found to be untruthful with their stuff. So many brands skip these tests, like these third-party tests that I just mentioned, to cut costs, because if you're not legally required, why would you? And if you're selling really well, people are going to still buy the product. You see it all the time. I bet you money right now, if you were to look up the brand of protein powder that you have in the fridge, or not in the fridge, in the pantry, go ahead and see, like, go on Google or Chat GPT or whatever and say, hey, is this certified for NSF for sport or USP or informed choice? Ask any of those, and chances are it's not. Okay, it just happens to be popular, and they got enough people behind the brand. They're influencers that are like, oh, it's the best thing ever. This is what let me get my results, even though their results came from a syringe, not a supplement. All right, now let's get into what you could do about it. Okay, or sorry, that's number 4. Number 3 is there's going to be a lot of people listening to this and hearing these things in the news and being like, okay, that's it. I'm just going to completely cut it out of my diet. I'm not going to have any protein powders. And hey, totally fine. But ask yourself, what are you going to do when you do that? Okay. Most people, they're just going to go back to the standard American diet. They're just going to go back to eating like shit because this was that one health habit that they're like, oh, I did something good. I increased my protein intake by drinking this shake. And now they're like, well, back to a case of the fuck it's. I'm just going to go back to what I was doing because I can't trust anything. And this gives me a reason to go back to the way I actually want to eat. And along with that, maybe you don't go that full on and you're like, okay, I'm still going to eat pretty well, but probably going to still underconsume protein. And when you underconsume protein, you're more likely to overconsume calories, because protein, when you try and get enough in your day, like in the beginning, when you are not used to eating a lot of protein and you finally get some, you are stuffed. I've had many clients have that happen to them, where just getting 90 or 100 grams of protein throughout the day was very, very challenging for them, to the point where they couldn't eat enough calories to gain weight, and they lost weight very easily. And that was their goal. So it's like, if that's your goal, it could be extremely helpful. And what are the costs of not getting the health benefits that come with reducing body fat, increasing your protein intake, which can help regulate blood sugar levels and all these good things that come with an increased amount of protein? So what are you missing out on that are positives, let alone all these negatives that we talked about before? And along with that, there's additional stress that comes with obsessing over clean foods. It could go so far that you end up in the orthorexic category, which there's a certain type of person that will go that far. It's not everybody, but it does open that door to potentially go that far. Now, what do we want to do as far as like what you're concerned with? Like, what should that next step be for you? What should we take away from this podcast and be like, okay, I'm just going to do this? Okay. Number 1 is, if you want to get your protein intake up, then try to aim for just lean whole food sources if you can. Now, if you are vegan or vegetarian or plant-based, just know, because you have more plants in the diet, there still will be a degree of lead exposure, because that's just the way it is when it comes to the soil quality that these are coming from. So you're not completely out of the woods. And I wouldn't be surprised if there were still lead amounts in lean proteins like animals, but because they're eating the grass from that soil. So there's always going to be a degree of it, but you can minimize it through simple solutions like that, like get it from whole foods. You can opt for whey instead of plant-based, and also stay away from the mass gainers. Like, basically what mass gainers are, they're protein powder, but then they throw in a bunch of cheap sugars in there to drive the calorie count up. So what you could do instead is get a solid whey protein or a plant-based protein that is NSF certified for sport, and have that, but then add in things like honey, peanut butter, simple, like olive oil if you want to go that route. Okay. Simple things that drive calorie count up because they're healthy fats, or they're complex carbohydrates, things like that, which will add to the calorie count and allow you to build that mass. But I'm assuming many people are not in that boat. But if you have a child, for example, that's trying to put weight on for sport or something like that, go that route. Just drive up the calories with real food, not these mixes, because on top of all that, you're saving yourself, your household, from a very smelly outcome. I'll leave it at that. And then you could also combine whey with plant-based protein. So that way, if you want to do like half a scoop, or 1 scoop of one scoop of the other, instead of getting 2 full scoops of that plant-based one, or that one that was deemed not so great, then you could go with that as well. Again, look for the certification, the third party testing certification, go for NSF certified for sport. That's like the top of the top. And like I said, they only allow for 12.5 micrograms, whereas like the WHO, USA, EU, they're at 100 micrograms. So go with the NSF certified for sport. And two of the brands that I know that I understand are very, very good are Momentous and Legion. All right. So if you want to look those up, I'm going to actually probably put those in the show notes. So I'll include the links there. And last thing I'll say is that if you really want to go as far as possible with reducing your potential exposure to lead, grow your own stuff. Okay. Start a garden, grow your own stuff. There's ways to do that in urban environments. I just haven't dug that far into it, pun intended. And when it comes to meats, see if you can find a local butcher that you know has their cattle, their pigs, their chickens on good quality soil. So you could do a little digging. I got to stop saying that. You could do a little looking into that and seeing if you could get a better quality that way. And that will allow you to feel a little bit better, sleep a little bit better at night, knowing you're not getting as crazy of an exposure to that stuff as you otherwise would. But just understand at the end of the day, we're exposed to stuff like this all the time, 24/7, because that's just the world that we live in. And it's due to convenience. It's due to other things outside of our control. And at the end of the day, many of us, if we do the big rocks, like if we make sure that we are getting good sleep, that we're minimizing stress, that we're eating mostly whole foods, drinking a good amount of water, exercising. Like if we do these things, our body has its own natural detoxifying process that will take care of a lot of this. Just make sure that you're doing that stuff so your body operates at its best and you're minimizing risk for these exposures that unfortunately we have to deal with in today's society. All right, so that is that for today. Thank you so much for listening in. If you need any sort of accountability when it comes to your fitness, your nutrition, I'm here for you. Okay. I have in-person training if you're close to Greenville, North Carolina, but I also do online coaching as well, where we can pretty much set up a individualized plan for you to follow to get all the awesome health benefits that come with exercising more, getting your nutrition right, figuring out stress management techniques, getting your sleep dialed in, and all that good stuff. But if you're not quite there yet, you don't need the accountability, then no worries. I would definitely still grab the Toned in 20 workouts down in the show notes or the description, wherever you're watching or listening, because those are 20-minute workouts you could do from home or on vacation or on a work trip, and you could still get a great workout in and get awesome results. So check those out too. All right, so that's it for today. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time, but until then, go kick some ass. Bye-bye.